Created it. It's www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Check it out, and we'll be back in about 2.5 minutes.
Não perde tempo escolhendo a roupa, porque no fim eu sei que vou tirar. Fala tchau pro seu batom na boca e fala oi pra quem te faz pirar. Se você já tá com a mesma sensação, pode vir, gente, que eu tô um vulcão. Tá descontrolada toda essa tara e não para porque a coisa ficou mara. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Rolar em altos amassos, amassos, amassos. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Rafa Gomes, digam no beat. Não perde tempo escolhendo a roupa, porque no fim eu sei que vou tirar. Fala tchau pro seu batom na boca e fala oi pra quem te faz pirar. Se você já tá com a mesma sensação, pode vir, que eu tô um vulcão. Tá descontrolada toda essa tara e não para porque a coisa ficou mara. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Rolar em altos amassos, amassos, amassos.
You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com, and thank you.
Coming to you from some far point station, like a cosmic tumbleweed, both north and south of the Pleiades. Here's your host, Gary Anderson.
Just wanted to make sure that thunder just moved on. Tonight we got a great guest. We got Ken Gerhard, who's been on many and various TV shows, about cryptics and all that stuff. And James, I haven't heard a sound from you. Are you still even there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. I was just listening to all this great info. I'll have a few questions here in just a jiffy.
Well, why don't you go ahead and ask them now and get them off your chest?
Okay, I'll do that. Hey, Ken, what do you got lined up? I mean, do you have a plan of attack to try to discover one of these cryptids, or what's your game plan on some of that?
Well, sadly, there aren't enough people doing real serious research at this point in all the areas that probably need to be covered. So the exception may be the Bigfoot field. There are a lot of organizations and groups that organize things. But, I have a specialization in a lot of things, lake monsters, thunderbirds, black panthers, giant snakes. I've investigated a lot of different accounts, and so I just try to, I try to cover as many bases as possible. A lot of it's seasonal, like certain parts of the country, you want to avoid bad weather because you're spending a lot of time in the woods. And a lot of it, comes up when there's a case where you have suddenly a flurry of sightings in a concentrated area over a short period of time, and that kind of gives you that amount of hope. But I mean, you said something earlier, and it was very true. It's finding one of these things is almost like mission impossible. It's like finding a moving needle in a haystack. So what you're really looking for is other physical evidence, trace evidence. Did they leave footprints, droppings? Did they grab something, bleed? So, I mean, again, it's probably a very, very difficult task, but that's where my focus is at, because I think you could prove some of these things exist if you can find any kind of physical trace evidence or DNA.
Right. And have you ever found any correlation in your research with, like, migration of deer or any other animals, or the seasons that coincide with Bigfoot sightings, maybe on the rise, that line up with those kind of things?
That's a good question. There have been other investigators that have tried to take the database of sightings and put them into computers to see if they could come up with any patterns, and not really. I mean, as far as migration, it seems like they'll have certain areas they really like and they'll return to on a regular basis, but they're not always in those areas. They may follow the food sources. I think Bigfoot is a generalist omnivore, like a bear. It eats pretty much anything, so it's going to go wherever there's any kind of food. And but they do seem to move around a little bit from time to time, but no one's been able to make out a real, precise pattern of migration or anything like that, which is one of the reasons they're so elusive.
Now, I've got to ask you a question here. Is all the time people have been trying to prove that Bigfoot exists? A friend of mine who passed on here recently, Art Bell, he's the one that got me out of retirement and back into radio, by the way. He had a guest on a show that claimed that he shot him and his couple Marine buddies, ex-Marine buddies.
Oh, yeah. Famous story, for sure.
Famous story. But I can see if a hunter is out in the woods, right, and dies of a heart attack or whatever, it doesn't take long before his remains are gone. I mean, animals will, carry off, the arm, leg, they find body parts everywhere. But Bigfoot, how can they have not found any remains of any Bigfoot?
Well, that's one of the big issues, and that's where I'm very, skeptical sometimes too, because it seems like they're large animals. At some point, someone would have found something, even if it had died by accident, get hit by a car, or who knows, hunter, again, as you said, a hunter maybe shooting one. And that may have happened in the past, but the hunter, when he realized what he shot, decided that it looked too human-like and didn't want to get in trouble, so he didn't tell anybody. Similar with someone that may have hit one with a car, who knows? But there are some, I think, some reasons for this. One of them is that I think these things are exceptionally rare. Well, how rare? It's all speculation, but we've figured out there have to be at least in the low thousands for them to have a viable breeding population, and that's still spread very thinly across the continent. There may be, for example, as many as 1,000 bears for every single Bigfoot. So they're very rare animals. But they're also possibly very, nomadic and nocturnal and all these things to avoid us. When they die, their remains there's a couple things that might happen. If they're apex predators, which they obviously are because of their great size, then nothing kills them too often. So when they die, they, like most animals, they might choose to hide their body, like bears and cougars and animals like that will crawl into low brush or hollow logs or caves, and they'll hide when they're sick. And subsequently, they're not as easy to find the remains of something like a Bigfoot as, say, a possum or a raccoon or something common, a deer. The other thing is there are theories that maybe they bury their own dead if they're intelligent enough to do that, and they're able to do that. Maybe they hide the remains if they don't want us to find them. But I think it's just we just haven't been in the right place at the right time. And my hope is that at some point someone will find the remains of one that's died of natural causes, or a bone, or some blood, or something that we can use to take to scientists and try to prove this thing.
Like Art, we sat there, many times. I've talked about, his one guest that was on twice about, the encounter of Bigfoot and killing it. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you heard the show itself. What was your feeling? Do you feel that was a put on, or Art really thought it was real because the guy did send him some information?
Yeah, well, Art obviously had the most contact with them, and he was a pretty sharp guy. But I think most people in the Bigfoot field view it as a hoax. And in fact, many of the claims, there have been many claims of people killing Bigfoot without any evidence to back it up, and even some hoaxes where people claim they killed Bigfoot. And if you think about it, Bigfoot is, even if it doesn't exist, which I'm convinced it does, but many don't, it's a fascinating cultural phenomenon. I mean, people the way they view these things, and it's not hard to understand why someone might claim they killed one. I mean, think about it. What is more macho than slaying this giant man-like hairy monster? You know, I mean, if you tell somebody you killed that, you're going to feel pretty good about yourself. And you know, a lot of people do commit hoaxes and make up stories to get attention and so on.
Well, if somebody's out there hunting and they accidentally shoot a Bigfoot, you know, cut its head off, cut its hand off.
A finger.
A finger.
I mean, that's all you need. One bone, one body part would prove it.
Yeah, and I hate to say this. I got in trouble. James, I don't know if you remember when I said this. I said this a couple months ago. I said, maybe that's what it takes. You know, you're out hunting, and if you see a Bigfoot, shoot it. And then at that point, you know, I know it's a horrible thing to say, to take a life. But on the other hand, it will give the proof that everybody, you know, that believes in Bigfoot, that it does exist. Then the government and, you know, the local authorities can make up a law to protect them at that point. But I mean, at least it would give us proof.
Yeah, and there are two polarizing sides in the Bigfoot community. There are the pro-kill people, just like you described, that say, hey, if we just kill one, then we can pass laws to protect the rest of them and make sure that none of the others are killed. There'd be one martyr. And then there are other people that are on the far side or the other side of the coin. They're called no-kill versus pro-kill. And the no-kill people say these things are too human-like. It would be homicide. And so it's one of the enduring debates that's been in the Bigfoot field for some 60 years. And I've seen some very passionate debates and arguments between Bigfooters about whether one of these things should be killed or not. But you're right. If that did happen, I mean, that would be the conclusive proof that you could take to any scientist and say, there it is. There's the body part that proves it definitively.
Yeah, it's certainly more proof than a footprint, or, you know, a lot of, you know, people claim they got hair from Bigfoot, but when it's analyzed, it'll come back and say, well, we can't really analyze it. It could be a bear. It could be something else. I mean, you know, I think we need the proof. Now, moving along, because you only can be on for an hour. Thunderbird. I watched a thing on one of the cable channels a couple weeks ago. There's a bunch of people out looking for Thunderbird. You're feeling a Thunderbird.
Well, Thunderbird is one of my specialties. It's one of the things that kind of early on in my cryptozoology career, I started getting reports. Where I'm at in South Texas, there seem to be a lot of reports of these great birds. And just like the Sasquatch, you have many, many Native American traditions that refer to the Thunderbirds, or these giant, massive birds with 20-foot wingspans that, you know, and they're called Thunderbirds because the beating of their wings sounds like thunder. And, you know, some traditions take it further and say they can shoot lightning out of their eyes. And but anyways, there are modern sightings too, and I've interviewed many, many people through the years that have claimed to have seen these massive birds. They're typically described as being covered in feathers, very dark, black or charcoal brown sometimes, having a hooked beak like kind of an eagle or a hawk. They're very ugly and prehistoric looking. They beat their wings, you know, slowly, and they're very clumsy because they're so big and heavy, man-sized. So, you know, I've gotten many, many sightings of those. And so, like I said, South Texas, there's a concentration in Illinois. In fact, there's a famous story of a young boy who was picked up by one of these things and carried for several feet before it let him go.
He was lucky.
Pennsylvania. So, yeah, they're out there. I'm convinced they're out there. But much larger than any known bird. And just for reference, Gary, as you know, the largest birds in North America are the California condors. And they're, you know, pretty fair-sized birds, but they only have a 9 or maybe a 9.5, 10-foot wingspan on a really big one. So we're talking about birds twice as big as a California condor.
This makes me wonder if somebody was unfortunate and ran into one, or it ran into them. Maybe that's why, you know, that person never reported it.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, I know of at least a handful of accounts of them picking up children. But, you know, I don't, you know, it's hard to say how big these things really are. I mean, we have to acknowledge it's very difficult for people to estimate the sizes of things that are up in the air, right? I mean, if it's landed on the ground or perched on something, it might be easier. But if it's flying overhead, you have to know the distance and altitude. So people may be exaggerating, and